Welcome back to Arise News Hour. I'm Charles Aniagolu in Abuja. 4 days after launching a ground incursion into Russia's Kursk region, Ukraine has hit a crucial Russian airbase further east. Sources in Ukraine's security services said several dozen fighter jets and helicopters at the Lipetsk air base were hit, as well as warehouses where more than 700 glide bombs were stored. Pictures online showed several explosions and a large fire at the airbase. Energy infrastructure is reported to have been damaged as well. President Zelensky has yet to specifically reference a major cross-border incursion, which has seemed to blindside Moscow, which is sending reserve troops to try and slow the advance. Meanwhile, Ukraine's emergency services say a Russian missile strike in the eastern Ukrainian town of Kostiantynivka has killed at least 11 people and wounded 44. A supermarket, post office, shops and cars were damaged. Well, for all this, let's cross live to London and speak with Arise European Affairs analyst Dr. Marek. Laskiewicz. Good to see you, Dr. Laskiewicz. So Ukraine apparently on the offensive in Russia after a big drone attack backing up its ground incursion in Kursk, amid reports that it's also launched an explosive attack on the Russian Lipetsk air base, which houses fighter jets, helicopters and hundreds of glide bombs. What do you make of all that?
Well, Ukraine has, as you said, blindsided Moscow and has undoubtedly scored some opening successes here. It is a very interesting incursion because if now it succeeds, if the Ukrainians hold their ground, it is a very big difficulty for President Putin, who will either be faced with the necessity of escalating the war or of a potential even threat to his leadership if he's seen he can't cope. Conversely, if Ukraine fails to carry out this in the sense of it is driven out, as of course the Russians are trying to do, then it'll be a major blow, because having put so much effort now into the incursion, if it fails, it will be a defeat for Ukraine. So an awful lot now rests upon this incursion, how it turns out.
Indeed, and as you pointed out there, it does appear to be significant. The incursion, of course, now in its fourth day, Russia not managing so far to slow it down. On the face of it, I mean, it looks like Ukraine is audaciously trying to extend this counter-punch from across the border and has reportedly gone at least 10 kilometers into Russia, and we're also hearing that it seized control of several settlements. I mean, what do you think Ukraine's goal is?
Well, one of the goals that was suggested was simply to disrupt a future Russian attack, which was being planned from that neighborhood. That, I think, is quite clearly, and to that extent, it has done so. Secondly, by seizing any territory at all, it is, of course, a major embarrassment for Russia. And were the incursion to manage to stay put and manage to hold these towns, it will be a significant victory for Ukraine. What is interesting, though, is it puts President Putin on the spot, because he cannot afford for the Ukrainians to win. And moreover than that, this is an escalation, of course, of the war, because Ukraine has never attacked Russian internationally accepted territory. As such, as I stated before, President Putin's prestige, his personal prestige, is now at stake, because he has to do something or face a very unpleasant situation for himself where he may lose power as a result. What is quite clear is this: he will have to reply, and he has an excuse to escalate the war further, since the Ukrainians have done so by invading Russia proper. Whether he chooses to do so or not, in fact, his next reaction to the next few days will be extremely important. If he does not succeed in coping with his invasion soon, there will be questions asked about his leadership.
Well, I'm going to come in a minute to that thing that you hinted at there, which is what Russia's response might be. But I mean, the point you're making basically is that either the goal of Ukraine is either to slow Russia's gains, for instance, in the east of Ukraine, or to draw Russian troops back from Ukraine. But in the final analysis, a major attack like this is not a good look for the Kremlin.
Precisely. Yes, there are, of course, the suggestions that the attack was made in order to draw troops away from Russian troops away from other fronts. It has also been said, as I stated a second ago, that is to disturb the preparations that Russia was making for opening up this front. But the real point is, it really doesn't matter anymore about that, is the fact that Ukraine has succeeded in seizing some Russian territory, has made an incursion into Russia proper. All these are escalations and successful escalations. And as you stated just a second ago, this is a problem now for Moscow.
And just to go back to that point you were raising earlier, do you think Ukraine is now bracing itself for a powerful and swift Russian response to this incursion? I mean, I would imagine that probability has fallen into Ukrainian calculations here.
I think the Ukrainians, having seen that President Putin has talked about the nuclear option but done nothing about it, feel that no such nuclear move will be made, and that therefore they can invade Russia proper without any problems. I believe that was the calculation. For different reasons, as I stated before, President Putin never meant to use nuclear weapons against Ukraine because he regards Ukrainians as a type of Russian, misled by, amongst others, neo-Nazis. That was his initial line for a long time. It therefore follows that Russia now really is on the spot, because what precisely will it do? And here there's a further problem. The Ukrainians undoubtedly took this into consideration. They've raised the stakes by making the incursion more and more solid. And this, as I reply, is a problem for Moscow, which threatens President Putin's power directly.
So, I mean, on the whole, would you say that there is a fine line between this incursion being a stroke of genius and being a major miscalculation when you consider that Ukraine is already well outmanned by Russian forces?
This is a very interesting point, and there has been much stated about that, as you rightly say. The point is the Ukrainians have made a move, and if they can succeed in holding on the territory, it will then have been a very good stroke. One must state, Russia has far more troops, it outguns Ukraine, and if, as I stated 2 days ago, that therefore this incursion probably will fail, it will result in a defeat for Ukraine, which will be a substantial one because they've invested so much resources in this. I believe the Ukrainians themselves are hedging their bets. That's why they haven't formally admitted to the incursion. So if it goes wrong, they never lauded it. They never stated it. This is the mistake they made with their counteroffensive previously, when they talked an awful lot about it. When it failed, it was widely seen as a disaster for Ukraine. This time they've been more canny and more cagey and have said nothing much officially, and therefore, were it to go wrong, they hope to mitigate the consequences of any failure. Personally, it would appear, on the basis of sheer amount of arms and size, that this incursion will in the end fail, and whereupon it will have been a spoiling attack to some degree of success. I don't think it, however, will escalate any further into non-conventional warfare, simply because Russia does not seek to do so against Ukraine.
And on that note, I want to thank you very much indeed. Dr. Marek Laskiewicz is a RISE European Affairs analyst who was talking to me on the line there from London.